So this video should be going public on YouTube on the Sunday, 1 week before the new Superman movie is in theaters. What's funny is that 2 weeks later, Marvel's latest attempt at launching a cinematic Fantastic Four will also be arriving in theaters, in hopes that maybe this one will get it right. So while not exactly a head-to-head, this is a good old-fashioned duel between the big two since 2016, I believe. And in that spirit, well, not so much in the dueling sense and more in the there may never be a more perfect opportunity to cover this comic sense, let's talk about Superman Fantastic Four. Published in April 1999, Superman Fantastic Four was a Treasury Edition one-shot, and a collaboration between DC and Marvel that was frankly not very uncommon at the time. While the fact that we are getting a new crossover between the two companies after so long has been hyped through the roof, during the late 90s, crossovers between the big two were fairly common. This was only a few years after DC vs. Marvel had happened, and fans would get a new crossover between the Hulk and Superman later in 1999 itself. As for the creative team, Superman Fantastic Four was headed by veteran comic writer Dan Jurgens, who also did the layout art for the comic. We had Art Thibert adding the finishing touches, while Gregory Wright did the colors and Billy Oakley the lettering. And we have superstar artist Alex Ross giving us a wonderful cover for the one-shot. The story of Superman Fantastic Four, called The Infinite Destruction, takes place in a multiverse where both the DC and Marvel universes coexist. Our story kicks off when Superman receives a transmission, seemingly from his father Jor-El, about the destruction of Krypton, namely that the being behind it was none other than Galactus. To find answers, Superman travels to the Marvel Universe and meets up with the Fantastic Four. Unfortunately, the villain known as the Cyborg Superman has hitched a ride with Clark, and he ends up attacking the heroes. In the middle of the chaos, Galactus kidnaps Superman and turns him into his newest herald. Now it's up to the Fantastic Four, along with an unlikely ally in Cyborg Superman, to try and save him from Galactus before he is used as an unwilling associate in the destruction of the lives of countless innocents. The story of Superman Fantastic Four is pretty good, and a recommendation to fans of both properties. Dan Jurgens manages to keep all the characters' voices and actions as close to how they would normally act, something that can sometimes get lost in these types of crossovers. Additionally, the inclusion of Cyborg Superman, who was also created by Dan Jurgens, is a sly nod to the fact that his origin is a dark homage to the Fantastic Fours, something he even notes in story. On a more lighter note, Franklin Richards, Rian Su's son, is a huge fan of Superman and looks up to him a lot. It is quite charming to see this little kid marvel at Superman's feats while also being worried about him after Galactus turns the Man of Steel into his herald. At the end of the story, Superman leaves his cape behind as a gift to Franklin. The whole thing even touched my cold, cynical heart. Now, for the longest time, this comic has been out of print. However, it has recently been published as a joint effort between the big two as a part of an omnibus collecting a bunch of these old crossover comics. On the surface, it's seemingly great that DC and Marvel were able to come together and release these long out-of-print crossovers for the fans who haven't had an easy way to get their hands on these. However, for me personally, it's hard to look past the fact that these crossover comics are coming back in print and new ones are making their way to stores very soon, indirectly because of the late George Perez. George Perez passed away in 2022 as a result of suffering from pancreatic cancer. The type of cancer he was suffering from was inoperable, and as such, there was no cure. In a surprising display of solidarity, the heads at DC and Marvel were able to push past all the red tape and give George Perez's JLA Avengers something which he held very dear to his heart, to the point he had stipulated in his contracts while working for other companies that if this crossover were to happen, he would be able to do it. A limited reprint as a form of tribute. And then, to no one's surprise, those reprints sold really well. Ergo, all the old crossovers were going to be reprinted and new ones would be coming soon. Because they were selling well. Yeah, there's something morbid about how all of this ended up playing out. And the whole thing serves as a reminder of how bad things get for comic book creators. As of me recording this, famed Hulk and Aquaman writer Peter David has passed away recently, with the last few years of his life being rejected for Medicaid and having to rely on a GoFundMe to try and pay his hospital bills. He's not the only one, as even more recently, famed Marvel editor-in-chief Jim Shooter also passed away after a long battle with esophageal cancer. As a fan, it hurts to see the people behind the comics we love so much having to spend their last few days in pain and struggle. And it hurts even more that the companies that they worked for didn't do much for them, despite clearly being able to. Sorry to end on such a somber note. This was supposed to be a fun video about a old crossover between DC and Marvel that just felt very significant, because when were we gonna ever have a moment when a Superman movie and a Fantastic Four movie were coming out in the same month, right? And the whole thing just ended up making me depressed. I mean, look, Superman Fantastic Four is great fun, and you should read it if you can get your hands on it. And hey, if the upcoming crossover comics interest you, you should read them as well. There are some that I will also read because I'm interested in the creative teams behind them. Just try to remember the people who worked on these comics. It's the least we can do.